A shattered beginning. The city shimmered under the glow of streetlights as Sarah and Michael drove home from their final prenatal checkup. Sarah's hand rested on her swollen belly, her heart full of anticipation. Their twins, a boy and a girl, were due in just a couple of weeks, and their excitement was palpable. "Can you believe it?" Michael said, his grin wide. "2 babies, 2 lives we get to shape." Sarah laughed softly, her fingers tracing circles on her belly. "You better be ready for diaper duty ×2. Michael reached over to squeeze her hand briefly, his eyes sparkling with love. "For you and them, I'm ready for anything." The world outside their car was calm, almost serene. It was the kind of night that whispered promises of new beginnings. But fate had other plans. As they approached an intersection, a pair of blinding headlights appeared out of nowhere. The screech of tires filled the air, and the last thing Sarah saw was Michael's face, his expression shifting from joy to terror. The impact was deafening. Metal crunched, glass shattered, and their car spun wildly before slamming into a guardrail. Silence followed, a heavy, oppressive quiet that seemed to swallow everything. Sarah's eyes fluttered open to the harsh glare of hospital lights. Her body felt heavy, her mind sluggish, as if she were swimming through molasses. Blinking against the brightness, she tried to move, but a sharp pain stopped her. "Where?" Her voice cracked, barely a whisper. Panic set in as her hand flew to her belly. "The babies, Michael." A nurse appeared by her side, her expression calm but somber. "Mrs. Carter, you've been in an accident. Please, try to stay still. The doctor will be here shortly." "No," Sarah said, her voice rising with desperation. "Tell me, are my babies okay? Where's Michael?" The nurse hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. "The doctor will explain everything." Moments later, a man in a white coat entered the room, his demeanor professional yet heavy with the burden of bad news. He pulled up a chair and sat down beside Sarah. "Mrs. Carter," he began gently, "the crash caused a placental abruption. We had to perform an emergency C-section to give your babies the best chance." Sarah's heart raced, dread clawing at her chest. "And Michael, where is he?" The doctor's eyes dropped briefly, his voice soft. "I'm so sorry. The impact on the driver's side was severe. He didn't survive." The words landed like a physical blow. Sarah's breath hitched, her body trembling. No, that's not possible. He was fine. He was right there." Tears streamed down her face as the reality sank in. Michael, her rock, her partner, the father of her unborn children, was gone. The world felt hollow, the weight of her grief almost unbearable. "I can't do this," she whispered, clutching her belly. "I can't do this without him." The doctor's tone grew firmer, though still compassionate. "Right now, your babies need you. You're their only hope." The resolve in his voice pierced through her despair. Wiping her tears, Sarah nodded. "Do what you have to do. Save them." The sterile air of the operating room was suffocating. Sarah lay still, her body numb from the spinal block, her mind a whirlwind of fear and grief. The rhythmic beeping of monitors and the quiet urgency of the medical team filled the room. She focused on the ceiling, counting the tiles to distract herself. The memories of Michael's laughter, his touch, his promises filled her mind. He should have been here, holding her hand, whispering words of encouragement. But he wasn't. Minutes passed, each one an eternity. Then, a piercing cry shattered the silence. "It's a girl," the surgeon announced, a rare warmth in his voice. "She's healthy and breathing on her own." Tears spilled from Sarah's eyes as the nurse brought the tiny, squirming baby closer. Her daughter's cries were a melody of life, a beacon of hope in the darkest moment of her life. "She's beautiful," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "Amelia. Her name is Amelia." But the relief was short-lived. The atmosphere in the room shifted as the team turned their attention to the second baby. The urgency in their movements, the low murmurs exchanged. Sarah's heart clenched. Why isn't he crying? she asked, her voice rising with panic. A nurse approached, her face tight with sympathy. "We're doing everything we can." Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Finally, the surgeon's voice broke through, heavy with sorrow. "I'm sorry. He didn't make it." "No," Sarah screamed, her voice raw with anguish. "No, please, let me see him." The nurse hesitated but eventually nodded. Moments later, Sarah cradled her son's still body, wrapped in a soft blue blanket. He was so small, so perfect, yet heartbreakingly still. "Benjamin," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't protect you." Amelia's cries broke through her haze, a sharp reminder of life amidst the loss. Sarah looked at her daughter, her heart splitting in two. One child alive, the other gone. The weight of it all threatened to crush her. As Benjamin was taken from her arms, Sarah whispered a vow to herself. "For Amelia, I'll find the strength. I have to." But she couldn't shake the feeling that Benjamin's story wasn't over. Little did she know, the next moment would change everything. A miraculous connection. The NICU was a symphony of soft peeps and hushed voices, a place where fragile lives hung in delicate balance. Sarah sat by Amelia's incubator, her eyes fixed on her daughter's tiny form. Amelia's chest rose and fell rhythmically, her strength a bittersweet beacon in Sarah's grief-stricken world. Across the room, Benjamin's incubator sat empty, a stark reminder of the life that had slipped away before it could truly begin. The nurses had moved his small body to a separate area, but Sarah couldn't shake the ache in her chest, the gnawing feeling that she hadn't done enough. "I want to see him," Sarah said abruptly, her voice trembling but resolute. A nurse standing nearby hesitated. "Mrs. Carter, I'm not sure." "Please," Sarah interrupted, her tone edged with desperation. "They were supposed to be together. Just for a moment. Let them be together." The nurse exchanged glances with a colleague, uncertainty etched across her face, but something in Sarah's eyes, perhaps the depth of her grief or the unyielding determination, prompted her to nod. "I'll bring him," the nurse said softly, leaving the room. As Sarah waited, her heart pounded. She didn't know what she expected from this moment. Closure, a fleeting sense of peace, or just the comfort of seeing her twins side by side, even if only for a little while. The nurse returned, cradling Benjamin in a soft blue blanket. His still form looked impossibly small, heartbreakingly serene. Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat as the nurse gently placed Benjamin's body beside Amelia's incubator. Sarah leaned forward, her hands trembling. "You're together now," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Just like it was meant to be." Amelia stirred, her tiny hand reaching out instinctively. It brushed against Benjamin's arm, a fleeting, delicate touch. Sarah gasped, her breath catching in her throat. For a moment, it was as if time itself held still. Then, impossibly, Benjamin's chest rose. It was a shallow breath, so faint it might have gone unnoticed if Sarah hadn't been watching so intently. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she leaned closer, her eyes wide. "Benjamin?" she whispered, disbelief thick in her voice. Another breath followed, and another. The monitors around him flickered to life, their beeps slicing through the heavy silence. The nurses sprang into action, their movements precise and urgent. One of them gently but swiftly moved Benjamin to his own incubator, attaching monitors and oxygen support. "He's breathing," one of the nurses said, awe creeping into her tone. "He's trying to breathe on his own." Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. "It's a miracle," she whispered, her voice trembling. "My baby, my Benjamin." The room was a blur of activity as the medical team worked to stabilize Benjamin. Sarah stood rooted to the spot, her gaze locked on her son. Her mind raced, a cacophony of disbelief, gratitude, and overwhelming emotion. She glanced at Amelia, whose hand had sparked this impossible moment. "They saved each other," Sarah murmured, her voice barely audible over the flurry of movement around her. The hours that followed were a haze of exhaustion and hope. Sarah sat between the two incubators, her hands resting on the glass that separated her from her children. She watched Benjamin's chest rise and fall, each breath a testament to the unyielding strength of life. A doctor approached her, his expression a mix of astonishment and caution. "Mrs. Carter," he began, his tone measured, "what we've seen here is extraordinary. We were certain Benjamin had no chance of survival, but his vitals have stabilized. It's too early to say for sure, but there's hope." "Hope," Sarah repeated, the word tasting foreign yet sweet on her tongue. She nodded, clutching the edge of her chair. "That's all I need." The doctor nodded, his gaze softening. "We'll monitor him closely. The next 48 hours will be critical." As he walked away, Sarah turned her attention back to the twins. She placed her hand gently on the glass of Benjamin's incubator. "You're a fighter," she whispered, "just like your sister." The story of Benjamin's miraculous revival spread quickly among the NICU staff. Nurses and doctors alike marveled at the event, calling it unprecedented and unexplainable. To Sarah, it felt like a gift, a second chance she hadn't dared to hope for. As the days passed, Benjamin's condition improved steadily, each milestone. A stronger heartbeat, better oxygen levels, was celebrated with quiet tears and whispered prayers. Sarah spent every waking moment in the NICU, dividing her attention between Amelia and Benjamin. One afternoon, as Sarah sat by Benjamin's side, a nurse approached her with a small smile. "We've been talking about what happened," she said, "about how Amelia reached out to him, how they connected. It's remarkable." Sarah nodded, her eyes glistening. "It's like she knew, like she wouldn't let him go." The nurse placed a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. "There's something special about twins. Their bond is unlike anything else." Weeks turned into months. Amelia thrived, her strong lungs and curious spirit shining through as she grew. Benjamin's journey was harder, fraught with setbacks and challenges, but he fought with a quiet resilience that amazed everyone who cared for him. Sarah often found herself thinking of Michael during these moments. She could almost hear his voice, encouraging her, reminding her of her own strength. In the quiet of the NICU, she would whisper to her children about their father, weaving his memory into the fabric of their lives. "Your dad would be so proud of you both," she told them one evening, her voice thick with emotion. "He always said you'd change the world, and I think he was right." As she spoke, Amelia cooed softly, her tiny hand reaching toward Benjamin's incubator. Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with a mix of love and gratitude. Despite the pain, despite the loss, her family was whole in a way she never could have imagined. And for the first time since the accident, Sarah felt something she hadn't dared to feel: hope. Building bonds in a fragile world. The NICU became Sarah's second home, a strange and sterile sanctuary where hope and fear danced in equal measure. Days blurred into nights, punctuated by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the faint hum of life-saving machines. Sarah lived for every small victory: Amelia's first solid feed, Benjamin's gradual ability to maintain oxygen levels on his own. Despite the progress, the challenges were unrelenting. Sarah's days were a delicate balancing act, splitting her attention between her two babies while navigating the heavy weight of grief. Michael's absence loomed large, a shadow in every moment of triumph. One morning, as Sarah sat by Benjamin's incubator, a nurse approached her. "Mrs. Carter," she said softly, "we've noticed something remarkable." Sarah glanced up, her eyes tired but attentive. "What is it?" The nurse gestured toward Benjamin's incubator. "Whenever Amelia cries, his vitals stabilize. It's as if her presence soothes him." Sarah's heart clenched. "They've always had a connection," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Even before they were born, they were inseparable." The nurse nodded. "Would you like to try something? We can arrange for their incubators to be closer. Sometimes proximity helps twins recover faster." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "Yes, please," she said. "I think they need each other." Later that day, The incubators were moved side by side, a small but significant shift in the tiny ecosystem of the NICU. Sarah watched as Amelia's restless movements stilled, her tiny fists unclenching as her brother's presence seemed to calm her. Benjamin, too, responded, his breathing evening out as his sister's soft coos filled the space. It was a moment of quiet magic, a reminder of the profound bond they shared. Sarah pressed her hand to the glass of their incubators, her heart swelling with both love and sadness. "You're stronger together," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You always will be." As the weeks passed, Sarah found herself surrounded by a small but steadfast community. The NICU staff became her lifeline, their kindness and expertise a source of comfort in the most challenging moments. Parents of other babies in the ward offered knowing smiles and shared stories of resilience and hope. One mother, Lisa, who was caring for a premature baby boy, became a fast friend. They often sat together during the long hours, their conversations weaving a tapestry of shared fears and quiet encouragement. "You're incredible, you know," Lisa said one afternoon, her voice filled with admiration. "Raising twins in the NICU, dealing with everything you've lost. I don't know how you do it." Sarah shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I don't feel incredible," she admitted. "Most days, I feel like I'm barely holding it together. But when I look at them," her gaze shifted to Amelia and Benjamin, "I know I have to keep going. For them." Lisa reached out, placing a reassuring hand on Sarah's arm. "You're not alone. Remember that." Despite the camaraderie, the weight of her circumstances pressed heavily on Sarah. Financial strain loomed as a constant threat. Medical bills piled up, and her savings dwindled rapidly. Sarah had been a freelance illustrator before the accident, but juggling work with the demands of the NICU felt impossible. One evening, after the twins had been settled, Sarah opened her laptop in the hospital's quiet lounge. She stared at the blank canvas of her drawing program, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Inspiration felt like a distant memory, buried under layers of exhaustion and grief. But then she thought of Amelia's tiny fist clenching in determination, of Benjamin's steady breaths after weeks of uncertainty. Slowly, her fingers began to move. She sketched a simple image. 2 stars side by side, their light intertwined. Beneath them, she added a single word: hope. The act of creating, however small, brought a flicker of relief. It was a reminder of who she had been before her world turned upside down. Over the next few days, Sarah began sketching in stolen moments: a flower blooming through cracks in the pavement, a sunrise breaking through storm clouds. Each piece was a reflection of her journey, of the fragile hope she clung to. One afternoon, as Sarah worked on a new piece, Lisa approached her with a curious expression. "What are you drawing?" she asked, peering over Sarah's shoulder. Sarah turned the screen toward her, revealing a delicate illustration of a mother holding 2 babies, their forms surrounded by soft, glowing light. "It's just something I've been working on," Sarah said, her voice hesitant. Lisa's eyes widened. "This is beautiful," she said. "You should share it. I bet other parents in the NICU would find comfort in your art." The idea planted a seed in Sarah's mind. That evening, she created a simple social media page and uploaded a few of her drawings, along with short captions about hope, resilience, and the bond between her twins. She hesitated before hitting post, unsure if her story would resonate with others. But within days, the page began to gain traction. Messages poured in from parents, caregivers, and strangers who found solace in her words and illustrations. "Your story gives me hope." One message read, "Thank you for sharing your light." Sarah was stunned. For the first time since the accident, she felt a sense of purpose beyond survival. Her art became a way to process her grief, to celebrate her children's strength, and to connect with others navigating their own storms. As the twins continued to grow stronger, Sarah found herself reflecting on the journey they had taken together. There were still challenges ahead: therapy sessions for Benjamin, sleepless nights, and the lingering ache of Michael's absence. But for the first time in months, the future didn't feel so daunting. One evening, as she sat by the twins' incubators, Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. She began to write, her pen moving swiftly across the page. "Dear Michael," she began, her heart aching with every word. "I wish you could see them. Amelia is so strong, so full of life. And Benjamin, he's a miracle. They're our hope, Michael. They're our light in the darkness. And every step I take for them and for you." As she finished, a soft cry drew her attention. Amelia stirred in her incubator, her tiny hand brushing against the glass. Benjamin's monitor beeped steadily beside her, a quiet affirmation of life. Sarah smiled through her tears, her heart full. No matter how fragile their world felt, she knew one thing for certain: love would always guide them forward, life beyond the hospital walls. The day Sarah had been waiting for finally arrived. After months of sleepless nights, medical setbacks, and unwavering hope, the twins were strong enough to leave the NICU. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and apprehension as she packed their belongings, her heart pounding as she prepared to take them home. A nurse handed her Benjamin, who was still connected to a portable oxygen tank, while another helped secure Amelia in a car seat. "You're ready for this, Sarah," one nurse said gently, sensing her unease. "You've done an incredible job here. And you'll do an incredible job at home." Sarah nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. As she carried the twins out of the hospital, the cold air hit her face, sharp and refreshing. It was the first time in months that she had stepped outside with her children, and the reality of this new chapter hit her like a wave. The drive home was quiet, the car filled with the faint hum of Benjamin's oxygen machine and Amelia's occasional soft coos. Sarah's heart felt heavy as she turned onto the familiar street where she and Michael had once dreamed of bringing their children home together. The apartment felt eerily quiet when Sarah opened the door. The space that had once been filled with Michael's laughter and their shared anticipation now felt hollow. She glanced around at the unfinished nursery, the unassembled cribs, and the unopened boxes of baby clothes that Michael had carefully chosen. Tears pricked her eyes, but she swallowed hard. One step at a time, she whispered to herself, her voice firm. She placed the twins on the living room floor, each nestled in their carriers, and sat down beside them. "Welcome home," she said softly, her voice trembling. "It's not perfect, but it's ours." Amelia gurgled in response, her tiny fists waving in the air, while Benjamin remained quiet, his steady breathing a reassuring sound. Sarah reached out, her fingers brushing against theirs. "We're going to figure this out together," she promised. The first night at home was chaos. Amelia cried inconsolably, her wails echoing through the apartment, while Benjamin's oxygen monitor beeped intermittently, setting Sarah's nerves on edge. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford, and by dawn, she was sitting on the couch, exhaustion etched into her face. Both twins were cradled in her arms, their small bodies warm against her. "I don't know how I'm going to do this," she admitted to the empty room, her voice breaking. "I'm so scared." As if in response, Amelia let out a soft giggle, the sound pure and unexpected. Sarah looked down, her lips trembling into a smile despite her tears. "You're my little light, aren't you?" she murmured, pressing a kiss to Amelia's forehead. She glanced at Benjamin, who stirred slightly, his tiny hand curling around her finger. "And you're my miracle." The weight of her grief didn't lessen, but in that moment, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't alone. She had them. And they had her. Together, they would face whatever came next. The days that followed were a whirlwind of adjustments. Sarah quickly realized that raising twins, especially one with medical needs, was a monumental task. Feedings, diaper changes, and monitoring Benjamin's oxygen levels consumed her every moment. Her freelance work as a graphic designer became a late-night endeavor, squeezed into the few hours when the twins were asleep. Financial strain loomed over her like a storm cloud, The hospital bills were staggering, and the cost of Benjamin's ongoing therapy was overwhelming. Sarah often found herself staring at her bank account, her chest tight with anxiety. One evening, after putting the twins to bed, she sat at her laptop, scrolling through job postings. None seemed feasible. She couldn't leave the twins for a traditional job, and her freelance projects barely covered the basics. Frustration bubbled up, and she slammed her laptop shut, tears streaming down her face. As she sat there, defeated, a faint cry from the nursery pulled her from her thoughts. Wiping her eyes, she went to check on the twins. Amelia was stirring, her tiny face scrunched in discomfort. Sarah picked her up, rocking her gently as she whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll figure it out." Determined to find a solution, Sarah began selling her artwork online. Her illustrations, inspired by the twins and her journey, resonated deeply with others. She created pieces that depicted hope, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between siblings. To her surprise, the response was overwhelming. Orders began pouring in, along with messages from people who were moved by her story. "Your art gives me hope," one person wrote. "Thank you for sharing your light." Sarah poured herself into her work, finding solace and purpose in the act of creating. Each sale brought a small sense of relief, a step toward stability. And as she worked, the twins grew stronger, their milestones a testament to their resilience. Amelia was the first to smile, her tiny face lighting up in a way that melted Sarah's heart. "You're going to change the world," Sarah whispered to her, marveling at her daughter's strength. Benjamin, too, surprised her with his quiet determination. His progress was slower, but each step forward felt like a victory. One afternoon, as Sarah was sketching at the kitchen table, a knock on the door startled her. She opened it to find Michael's best friend, David, standing there with a box in his hands. "I thought you could use some help," he said, his voice kind but tentative. Sarah blinked back tears as she stepped aside to let him in. "Thank you," she said softly. David quickly became a steady presence in their lives. He helped with errands, assembled the nursery furniture, and even learned how to manage Benjamin's oxygen equipment. His presence was a balm to Sarah's weary soul, a reminder that she didn't have to carry everything alone. As the weeks turned into months, the apartment began to feel less like a place of loss and more like a home. The memory of Michael was ever present, woven into their daily lives. Sarah created a small tribute in the living room, a shelf adorned with his favorite books, a framed photo of him holding Sarah's pregnant belly, and a small plaque that read, "Forever in our hearts." Each night, Sarah told the twins stories about their father, her voice filled with love and longing. "He would have adored you both," she said one evening, her fingers brushing against Benjamin's cheek. "He always said you were our greatest adventure." Amelia cooed softly, her wide eyes locked on Sarah's face, while Benjamin let out a contented sigh. Sarah smiled, her heart full. She still didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. As long as they had each other, they would find a way forward. Resilience in the face of adversity. Life outside the hospital had settled into a rhythm, chaotic, exhausting, but deeply rewarding. The twins were growing stronger every day, and with each passing milestone, Sarah felt a mix of pride and gratitude. But as she navigated the challenges of single motherhood, the weight of her circumstances continued to test her resilience. Amelia, always curious and energetic, began crawling first. Sarah laughed through tears the day she saw her daughter scoot across the living room floor, her tiny hands and knees propelling her forward with determined grunts. "You're unstoppable, aren't you?" Sarah said, scooping Amelia up and peppering her cheeks with kisses. Benjamin, ever the quieter of the two, took longer to reach the same milestone. His physical therapy sessions were grueling, and Sarah often worried about the toll it took on his small body. But Benjamin had a quiet determination that left Sarah in awe. One evening, as Sarah sat on the floor playing with Amelia, Benjamin pushed himself onto his knees for the first time. His movements were shaky, his breaths labored, but his resolve was unbreakable. "You're doing it, sweetheart," Sarah exclaimed, her voice thick with emotion. She watched as Benjamin crawled a few inches toward her before collapsing into her arms, his tiny face lighting up with a smile. "You're a fighter," she whispered, holding him close. "Just like your daddy." Despite the joys of watching her children grow, Sarah's financial struggles loomed like a dark cloud. Her art business had gained traction, but the mounting costs of Benjamin's medical needs and the twins' everyday expenses often left her scrambling to make ends meet. One afternoon, as Sarah sat at her makeshift desk reviewing bills, a notice from the therapy center caught her eye. Benjamin's physical therapy sessions had reached a critical juncture, and his therapist recommended an intensive program that promised significant progress, but at an exorbitant cost. Sarah's heart sank as she stared at the numbers. She couldn't afford it. Not even close. Frustration bubbled up, and she buried her face in her hands. "What am I supposed to do?" she whispered, her voice cracking. The answer came later that evening, in the form of an email. A local parenting blog had discovered her artwork and wanted to feature her story. They offered not only to share her journey, but also to host a fundraiser to help cover Benjamin's therapy costs. Sarah read the email twice, her chest tightening with a mix of disbelief and hope. She hesitated. Sharing her story so publicly felt vulnerable, almost exposing, but the thought of giving Benjamin the chance he deserved pushed her fear aside. With a deep breath, she typed her response. "Yes, thank you." The blog post went live a week later, accompanied by photos of Sarah and the twins and snippets of her artwork. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support poured in from strangers near and far, each one a testament to the impact of her story. Within days, the fundraiser exceeded its goal. Sarah stared at the donation total, her hands trembling. Relief washed over her, followed by a surge of gratitude so intense it brought her to tears. She reached out to the blog's editor to thank them, her voice cracking as she said, "You've given my son a chance I didn't think was possible. Thank you." With the funds secured, Sarah enrolled Benjamin in the therapy program. The sessions were intense, requiring both of them to push past their limits. Sarah often sat in the therapy room, her hands clenched tightly as she watched Benjamin struggle through exercises designed to strengthen his muscles and improve his coordination. One day, as Benjamin worked with his therapist, Amelia toddled into the room. She had just started walking and was eager to show off her new skill. "Look, Benny," she squealed, her chubby legs carrying her in uneven steps. Benjamin watched her, his eyes wide with awe. Then, with a burst of determination, he reached out for the small walker his therapist had placed in front of him. His grip was unsteady, and his movements were slow, but he pushed himself upright. Sarah held her breath as Benjamin took his first step, then another. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "You're doing it, baby. You're walking." Amelia clapped her hands, her face glowing with excitement. "Good job, Benny," she cheered, her voice filled with sibling pride. The bond between the twins deepened with each passing day. Amelia, with her outgoing personality and boundless energy, became Benjamin's fiercest advocate. She often stayed close during his therapy sessions, offering hugs and words of encouragement in her toddler way. One evening, as Sarah prepared dinner, she overheard a conversation between the twins that made her heart ache and swell simultaneously. "Why do I need all this stuff?" Benjamin asked, gesturing to his braces and walker. "Because you're a superhero," Amelia replied matter-of-factly, "and superheroes have cool gear." Benjamin's face lit up, and he nodded solemnly. "Yeah, superheroes are strong." Sarah wiped her hands on a towel, her chest tightening with emotion. "You both are," she whispered to herself. As the months turned into years, the twins continued to grow, their bond unshakable. Sarah's art business flourished, her illustrations evolving into a vibrant celebration of resilience and love. She often included the twins in her work, their story inspiring others to find strength in their own struggles. One day, as Sarah worked on a new piece, Amelia climbed onto her lap, her wide eyes filled with curiosity. "What are you drawing, Mommy?" Sarah smiled, tilting the screen to show her. It was an illustration of two stars shining brightly against a dark sky, their light intertwined. "It's about you and Benny," she said softly. "How you light up each other's lives." Amelia grinned, leaning her head against Sarah's chest. "We're a team," she said proudly. Sarah kissed the top of her daughter's head, her heart full. "Yes, sweetheart. Always." Despite the challenges they had faced, Sarah knew they had built something extraordinary, a life defined not by the struggles they endured, but by the love and resilience that carried them through. And as she looked at her children, their laughter filling the room, she knew Michael would have been proud. The legacy of strength and love. The years that followed were a testament to resilience, growth, and the power of an unbreakable bond. By the time Amelia and Benjamin turned 6, their world had expanded beyond the walls of their home and therapy rooms. They were thriving, their unique personalities shining brighter with each passing day. Amelia was a whirlwind of energy and curiosity, her adventurous spirit leading her to climb trees, race bicycles, and dive headfirst into every challenge. She excelled in school, her teachers often praising her for her determination and kindness. Benjamin, quieter but equally strong-willed, had grown into his own. His therapy sessions, though still a regular part of his life, became less daunting as he developed confidence in his abilities. By the time he entered first grade, he no longer relied on his walker, his careful steps a testament to years of hard work and perseverance. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah stood on the porch, watching her children play in the yard. Amelia raced ahead, her laughter ringing out as she led Benjamin on a scavenger hunt for leaves. Benjamin followed close behind, his gait steady and purposeful. The sight filled Sarah's heart with pride and gratitude. "Mommy," Amelia called, holding up a golden leaf. "This one's perfect for our collection." Benjamin nodded, his small hands clutching a crimson leaf. "I found one too." Sarah clapped her hands, smiling warmly. "You two are the best team I've ever seen." Amelia ran up to the porch, her eyes bright. "That's because we're twins, Mommy. Twins always stick together." Benjamin joined her, leaning into his sister's shoulder. "We're stronger together," he said softly, his voice carrying a quiet wisdom beyond his years. Sarah knelt down, pulling them both into a tight hug. "Yes, you are," she whispered, "and I'm so proud of you both." That evening, as the twins sat at the kitchen table coloring pictures, Sarah worked on her latest illustration. Her art, which had started as a way to process her grief, had grown into a thriving business. She had published several children's books, each one inspired by her journey with Amelia and Benjamin. Her work resonated with families across the world, touching hearts and spreading hope. Her latest project was particularly special. It was a story about two stars, drawn together by an unbreakable bond, who overcame the darkness to shine brightly. It was a tribute to Amelia and Benjamin, and to the love that had carried them through their hardest moments. As she sketched the final page, Benjamin walked over, his curiosity piqued. "What are you drawing, Mommy?" Sarah turned the illustration toward him, smiling softly. "It's about you and Amelia," she said, "about how you've always been each other's light." Benjamin studied the picture for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Like Daddy's star," he said quietly, pointing to the corner of the page where a small star glowed faintly, watching over the others. Sarah's breath hitched, her heart swelling. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "Just like Daddy's star. He's always with us, cheering us on." Amelia joined them, her eyes widening as she saw the illustration. "Can we read it when it's done?" she asked excitedly. "Of course," Sarah said, pulling them both into her lap. "This story is for you." The twins' 8th birthday marked a milestone not just for them, but for Sarah as well. She organized a celebration in the park, inviting their friends, family, and neighbors. It was a sunny day, the air filled with laughter, and the scent of freshly baked cupcakes. Amelia darted around with her friends, her boundless energy infectious. Benjamin, though more reserved, smiled brightly as he played a game of tag, his movements confident and free. Watching them, Sarah felt a wave of emotion. They had come so far from those fragile days in the NICU, their strength and resilience shaping not only their lives but hers as well. As the party wound down, Sarah gathered everyone around for a special moment. She stood with the twins by her side, a microphone in hand. "I want to thank all of you for being part of our journey," she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "When Amelia and Benjamin were born, our world was turned upside down. We faced challenges I never thought we could overcome. But these two," she looked down at her children, her eyes glistening with tears, "they taught me what it means to be strong, to never give up, and to always find light in the darkest moments." The crowd erupted into applause, and Amelia beamed, waving enthusiastically. Benjamin clutched his sister's hand, his smile shy but proud. That evening, after the twins had fallen asleep, Sarah sat in her living room, a cup of tea in her hands. She glanced at the memory corner she had created years ago, now filled with mementos of their journey. Photographs of milestones, framed drawings, and a small flickering candle in front of Michael's picture. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes on Michael's smiling face, "for giving me the strength to keep going, for giving me them." The candle's flame flickered, casting a warm glow that seemed to embrace the room. Sarah closed her eyes, a sense of peace washing over her. As the years passed, Amelia and Benjamin continued to grow, their bond unshakable. Amelia excelled in school and sports, her determination and kindness earning her admiration from everyone who knew her. Benjamin, with his quiet strength and thoughtful nature, pursued his love of art and storytelling, often collaborating with Sarah on new projects. One day, as Sarah watched them from her studio, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had been anything but easy, but it had shaped them into a family defined not by their losses, but by their love. And as she picked up her pencil to begin her next illustration, Sarah knew their story wasn't just about survival. It was about the unbreakable bond that had carried them through, and the light they continued to shine into the world. Years turned into milestones, and milestones turned into memories. Amelia and Benjamin grew into teenagers, each carving their own unique path while staying deeply connected to one another. Sarah watched with pride as her children blossomed, their personalities shaped by their shared journey and the love that had guided them. Amelia, now a confident and ambitious 16-year-old, had become a leader in her school. She excelled academically, played soccer with unmatched determination, and volunteered at local organizations. Her natural charisma drew people to her, but it was her kindness and compassion that made her truly stand out. Benjamin, quieter and more introspective, had found his voice through art. His drawings told stories of resilience, beauty, and hope. He often collaborated with Sarah on projects, his talent complementing hers in ways that created something extraordinary. Despite the challenges he still faced, Benjamin's confidence had grown steadily, and he was beginning to see his own strength. One evening, as Sarah prepared dinner, she overheard a conversation between the twins in the living room. "I still think you should tell her," Amelia said, her tone encouraging. "I don't know," Benjamin replied, hesitating. "What if it's not good enough?" "Benny, nothing you do could ever not be good enough," Amelia said firmly. "Mom would love it." Curious, Sarah stepped into the room, wiping her hands on a towel. "What's going on in here?" Benjamin's cheeks flushed, and he fidgeted with the sketchpad in his hands. "It's nothing," he mumbled. Amelia grinned and nudged him gently. "Go on, show her." With a sigh, Benjamin handed Sarah the sketchpad. On the page was a beautifully detailed illustration of their family: Sarah, Michael, Amelia, and Benjamin, standing together under a canopy of stars. The stars glowed faintly, their light forming the shape of a heart around the family. Sarah's breath caught as she studied the drawing. Her hand trembled as she traced the lines, her throat tightening with emotion. "Benjamin," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This is This is beautiful. I wanted to do something for you, Benjamin said quietly. You've done so much for us, and I wanted you to know how much you mean to me. To us. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she pulled Benjamin and Amelia into a hug. You two are my everything, she said, her voice filled with love. This is the greatest gift I could ever ask for. As the twins prepared for their futures, Sarah found herself reflecting on how far they had come. She remembered the days in the NICU when she had prayed for a miracle, the nights when she had doubted her own strength, and the moments when love had carried them through. One evening, as she sat in her studio, finishing a new piece, Benjamin walked in holding a small box. I have one more thing for you, he said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Sarah opened the box to find a handmade locket. Inside was a tiny version of Benjamin's drawing, etched in delicate detail, along with the words, "Forever we shine together." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her heart swelling. Benjamin, this is perfect. It's from both of us, Amelia said, stepping into the room with a grin. We wanted you to have something to remind you that we'll always be by your side. Sarah hugged them tightly, her heart overflowing. I don't need a locket to remember that, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But I'll treasure this forever. As the years passed, Sarah's children grew into adults, their bond with each other and with her unshakable. Amelia pursued a career in medicine, inspired by the care Benjamin had received in his early years. Benjamin became a celebrated artist, using his work to inspire others and tell stories of hope and perseverance. Sarah, now in her 60s, watched with pride as her children built their own lives while remaining deeply connected to the family they had created together. Her home, filled with memories, laughter, and love, became a gathering place for not only her children but also their families. One evening, as the family sat together under a starlit sky, Sarah looked around at the faces she loved most. Amelia held her young daughter, who giggled as Benjamin showed her how to draw a star. The soft murmur of conversation and the sound of laughter filled the air. Sarah leaned back, her gaze drifting upward. The stars shimmered above, and she felt Michael's presence, a comforting warmth that had never truly left her. She placed a hand over the locket around her neck, the words inside echoing in her heart. Forever we shine together, she whispered, a smile spreading across her face. In that moment, Sarah knew that their story, a story of love, loss, resilience, and hope, was not just hers. It belonged to all of them, a legacy that would continue to shine brightly for generations to come.